Hello and welcome everyone to Looking Beyond the Glass Ceiling. My name is Giovanni and I'm a customer education specialist here at Box. Over the past 3 years, I have enjoyed contributing and belonging to a vibrant, values-driven community that celebrates my whole self. Our communities are a big driver for our culture here at Box, and it's what makes working here so fun, quite honestly. From our employee resource groups, our employee resource communities, and to our impact via box.org, our culture shows up through our communities and organizations in so many different ways. To speak a bit more about our culture here at Box and the organization we will be highlighting today, I would like to give a special welcome to Stephanie Carullo, our Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you, Joe, and welcome everyone. Thanks so much for taking some time to join us today. We are super excited to have you with us. And I'm incredibly humbled, honored and proud to have this really amazing group of leaders that you'll hear from shortly. Before we jump in, I just wanted to spend a few minutes just telling you a little bit about why inclusion and diversity is so important for here at Box. When we talk about life at Box, it sort of anchors us on everything that we do. And it was one of the things that I think really I embraced when I arrived here, this love of belonging, which is part of our core values. And as I think about diversity, someone once said to me that smart teams will do amazing things, but truly diverse teams will do impossible things. Which is incredibly true. As I look back on my career, I've been in the technology industry now for over 30 years. And from the very, very beginning, the experiences that I had with the companies that I chose to be a part of really set me up for what I think has been a really interesting career. And a lot of this was because these organizations truly embraced diversity and diversity of thought. And as I think about why it's so important for us here at Box, diversity of thought means we have this opportunity to embrace the uniqueness of the individuals that form our Box family here. As I think about things like creativity and innovation, bringing people with different perspectives, different experiences, different skill sets, different ways of problem solving together enables us to do really amazing things. And as I look around our organization, we have the great fortune of being able to embrace people from all walks of life, all over the globe. And that's what makes it such a rich culture. And looking back at things that have been really, really important to me throughout my professional career, there are probably 3 or 4 things that I would mention that I think you'll hear from our panelists today. The importance of a network and being part of communities, be it either in your professional life or in the broader community that you live in, has always been incredibly important. So learning from each other and being part of a group of people that are always there for you has been really, really important. Mentors, and something that I think you'll hear some incredible stories from the very, very beginning. My very, very first mentor was a woman called Barbara Purley. I was 21 years old and she took me under her wing and she nudged me when I thought I couldn't do something. And she always said, you know, I'm going to throw you a lifeline. Don't you worry. You're never going to be too far away. And she was the very, very first professional mentor that I had. And I still remember so many of the little nuggets that she taught me along the way. And then over the next 30 years of my career, I've been able to enlist other mentors who all provided me with some guidance and direction when I needed it most and acted as a terrific sounding board. And then I think in the last 10 years, this concept of allyship has become really, really important. And that is just embracing people from all over your network and your community who will help you do the things that are important and that are right. And I think have really enabled us to extend our networks. And we're really proud of the work that we do across the broader organization and within our own ecosystem and the importance of allyships. And so I think some of those themes you'll hear from our panelists today. They'll share very personal stories. Hopefully you'll get a sense for why some of the challenges that we all face, but also some of the opportunities that we've been able to embrace as a result of working in our community. So we're really, really excited for you. Hopefully you get an opportunity to ask some questions at the end as well, because I know our panelists would be delighted to answer those as well. But it is something that is very special at Box in terms of the way we think about bringing our community together and being part of something where we can do our very best work. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Jo.
Thank you so much, Steph, for giving us the ins and outs and importance of what exactly allyship means, and as well as a little bit of insight into our culture here at Box. Now we're going to go ahead and jump into things. So to get started, I want to introduce our lovely panelists. So I have with me today Jackie, Raven, Kennika, and Rachel. I'm actually going to pass it on over to the ladies to tell you a little bit more about themselves, starting with Kennika.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kennika Laroya. I am the outbound director for Box's sales team. I was based out of the San Francisco office, now based out of the New York one, and I have been at Box for about 6.5 years. So very excited to be here with all my peers that I have gotten to grow and at Box with. So yeah, excited.
Raven, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. My name is Raven Miles, and I have been at Box for almost 4 years now. I am a director of sales for our commercial space. So I'm also super excited to be here and happy to chat with you guys.
Awesome. Rachel?
Hey everybody, very excited to be here, especially alongside Kennika and Raven and Jackie. I am a director for our solutions engineering team. I manage our West teams, ANZ, as well as our commercial solutions engineering teams across the US, and I'm based in San Francisco.
Lovely. And then last but certainly not least, Jackie.
Hi everybody, I'm Jackie Navares. I oversee the field marketing teams for Canada, the US East Coast, and Australia and New Zealand. I'm based out of the New York City office, and I've been at Box for about 4.5 years now. But I also wanted to extend a thank you to Jo and team for having us here. I'm so excited to be on this panel with these 3 phenomenal women, and I'm just excited to get this conversation kicked off.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, ladies. And just as Jackie mentioned, I don't know about you all, but I am very excited and ready to start this conversation. So let's go ahead and kick things off and jump right in, shall we? So for my first question, although you are all women of color, there are many ethnicities that actually encapsulate that intersection. Each of you all have faced different experiences throughout your careers. So reflecting on your careers, can you all share with us today some experiences you all might have encountered throughout?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick us off. So I really love this question. I think it forced me to really reflect on my career from this kind of lens. And what I kind of learned through this process is I recognize that I spent a lot of my early career as a minority, as a woman, kind of unintentionally trying to blend in, trying to assimilate as quickly as possible, as frictionlessly as possible. I didn't really operate as a person of color or woman early on because I think in a way I wasn't really self-aware of my otherness in this field. And I think also there was aspects that I was nervous that my identity would be a deterrent to my ability to be successful in this field. For example, even my name. When I started as an individual contributor, I went by Kennika. And I still do go by Kennika. I think, it's just kind of followed me throughout, and which is a more Americanized pronunciation of my name. I didn't want customers to slip up on, an accurate but accented version of it, which is Kennika. And that wasn't unusual to me. It was, I grew up with a lot of Indian professionals who had given themselves more Americanized name to operate in this, workforce. But then as I built more confidence in myself as a working professional, you realize that there are aspects of your identity that do and, rightfully should be represented in the way you show up every day. And I think about that especially because I ended up on this leadership track in the go-to-market function. And, you start to see the makeup in the room start to change, and smaller numbers of women, smaller numbers of people of color. And it brought a lot of the differences in perspective into focus. You know, I have different perspectives from a lot of those in the environment, you know, such as it might be something like sales philosophy. It might be an idea of how to run a team or how to hire a team. So I think in reflecting on my experiences, like what I've learned is identity is a process. It takes time for each one of us to like learn how to navigate it, embrace it as a working woman, as a person of color. Like for some, it might be more immediate, but for me, it definitely was a process and it took time.
Yeah, and I think thinking about, you know, what you just shared, I think another big piece for me personally is just being unapologetic as well. And I think I struggled with some of those things in the beginning of my career too. I think for me in sales, I had a very traditional path prior to Box. I was at a pretty big cloud company and I started out as an SDR and kind of worked my way up to be an individual contributor or an AE. And I got to this place where I wanted to do something different or something more. And so I was going to take on a role for a different team, but at that exact same time, one of the managers in our group was leaving. And so my manager at the time was like, hey, Raven, I think this could be a really great opportunity for you. You know, maybe this is something you can consider. But when I looked at the opportunity, I was kind of like, there's nobody like me in that. So I didn't even see myself fitting in that world. But, you know, I went for it because I knew being a leader was something that I always wanted to do. Long story short, I got the job. And walking into the job, though, before that, I was always very outspoken, never really, you know, had any problem expressing myself. But when I walked into that role, I was like really intimidated by it and felt similar to what you described, like I had to fit into what everyone else was trying to do, or I had to like tone myself back in a way. And you could see that I was just like uncomfortable all the time. And so my VP at the time, he put some time on my calendar. He's like, look, I want us to sit down one-on-one because we need to, you know, we just need to talk about how things are going or wherever. And so I remember our first conversation, he said to me, he's like, I know you're uncomfortable. I can tell. And he said, but that's okay. And I'm sure you're hearing a lot of different things from people. He's like, you may be hearing, because at the time there were no African Americans on our leadership team. There were actually not even any women on our leadership team. And he said, you're probably hearing from people that you got this role because you're Black. Maybe that's what people are saying. You may be hearing from people that you got this role because you're a woman. He's like, honestly, Raven, none of that's true. He's like, because you got this role because you were the best person for that role. But as you hear those things in your career, don't you ever apologize for being Black, and don't you ever apologize for being a woman. And it's not like I didn't know that, because I came from a house where my parents raised me to be strong and independent and be proud of who I am. But it was moments like that where I was almost affirmed that it was okay that I was there, that it was actually, I was there for a reason, and that it, you know, I didn't apologize for who I was, and I almost found my voice in that moment. And I do think that that changed the way that I viewed myself in the working world. So
yeah, echoing what Raven and Kennika both said, you know, early in my career, I didn't see myself in a leader. And so I ultimately just kept my head down and started paving the way, and for others, hopefully. And with that, there was also the side piece of it that comes into with the identity piece. Every time I would speak about my background and my ethnicity, you know, some of the comments to me were, but you're white, you know, referring to my skin tone, because and it was like, but how do you relate? How, like, this doesn't affect you. And so with that, it kind of just like suppressed my voice a little bit. And I'm like, all right, where do I actually identify? What group do I actually relate to? And so with that, I kind of just kept tunnel vision and kept my head down and kept working and trying to just get ultimately where I wanted to be. And then coming into management, I think that really made me pick my head up and realize, I think myself, along with the majority of our panelists, we're all actually daughters of immigrants. And we all actually have experiences and stories to share, not only from ourselves, but from the community and the populations that we represent. So I think that that moment also helped me kind of, you know, find my voice as well. And from there, started getting involved, participating more, mentoring more, and just really listening and learning.
Yeah, that actually really resonates with me, Jackie, because I think that the amount of times that I've heard someone say like, oh, but you're one of us, you're whitewashed. It's like, but what does that actually mean? And it's,
or the other one, Rachel, you speak so well. That's another one that sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No accent.
Right. And it's intended as a compliment. But for me, it's like, wait, what? And it's exactly what Jackie and Raven were saying, like, don't apologize. Don't separate. Don't feel like you need to assimilate. There were two experiences that really stand out for me. The first actually happened when I was an individual contributor. And it was a moment for me where I think it really clicked, like, oh, it's different. And Jack and I actually talked about this, and she's had a really similar experience. I was walking into one of our target accounts, really big law firm. We're meeting with the CIO. I'm going in with everyone's male, everyone's white. And the CIO comes in and shakes everyone's hand, except for mine. And I was like, wait, isn't this meeting about security and architecture? Like, I'm the solutions engineer. You should be talking to me. But it didn't click, and I just kind of sat down. And so he starts asking these questions, and he first looks at the account manager who brought us in. The account manager then looks at the sales director. The sales director then looks to me, and then I answer the question. Then it happens again, and then again. And then finally, the CIO, who was originally facing the account manager, moves his body and starts having this dialogue with me. And so for the next 45 minutes, we're talking about all the things like that he's really interested in, our encryption, our architecture, all the nerdy stuff that we really love as SCs. And I remember after this meeting, I was talking to my manager at the time, and I was like, did I mess up? Like, should I have called out that microaggression? Should I have stuck out my hand and said, hi, I'm Rachel, I'm the solutions engineer? Was that a misstep? And he kind of actually said, like, but you proved your worth, you proved your value, you brought your voice into that conversation, because he completely changed his body language to talk to you. And the account manager actually told me after the meeting that he had never spent that much time with the CIO ever, and he had been on the account for 4 years. And after that meeting, the CIO actually put us up in front of the IT team, the security team, and actually truly became our champion. I think it clicked for us, like, yes, there are moments where people are going to make assumptions based off of the way that you look. But when you surprise someone and you really get their attention, you're changing their assumptions. And I think that that's something that we often forget. Like, yes, it can look a certain way, it can be tough, but when you work really hard and you come correct, your work really speaks for itself. And that's actually only been amplified as I've moved into management. I think when I was in IC, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to really say anything, just like Jackie and Kennika were saying, like, I don't know, do I really have a voice? Do I have enough experiences? And I thought the same thing going to people management. And then even as a director, I was like, I don't know, do I still even have a voice? Like, what do I really say? And I realized that I was really playing it small. This last year has been tough for all of us. It goes without saying, it's been incredibly unprecedented. It's truly an intersection of two terrible diseases, COVID and racism. And I was really nervous actually to address it head on with my team, because we hadn't said anything as an org. And so I wasn't sure. And I also feel like my experience, even though there was a height of racism against Asian Americans when the pandemic first started, and actually my dad was threatened in the street, and I was just bawling after that they're like, we're going to call the cops on you. Like, you're not supposed to be doing this. And I was like, can I even talk about this experience to the other Black and brown individuals on my team? And then I realized that some of them may have never reported to a woman or a minority. They may have never been asked by someone in leadership, are you okay? Or been encouraged to take time for themselves. And when I had that realization, I was like, I can't play it small, because I could change that space for them. And so I think those two experiences really separated it out for me, Joe, that you come correct into your work will speak, and then that creates space for other people to do the same thing.
And it also challenges you to find your voice even more. I had similar experiences. I remember my first job in the tech industry. I was an event manager in my first conference that I went to. A customer walked up, and we're handing out tchotchkes and just the usual. And a customer walked up and blatantly asked me if they hired me to be a booth babe, basically. And that was my first experience of just like, I cannot believe this is actually a question that's being asked to me. And so shell shock and quiet. And then a couple of days later, I was with some of my reps, we were out to dinner, and a customer walked by, and the same thing to Rachel, shook everybody's hand and then skipped me. And at that point, that's when I was like, hi, I'm Jackie. I'm the marketing manager here, and just stuck my hand out, because I'm like, this is unacceptable. And so it really kind of forces you to, build up that courage and just find your voice and speak up.
I think a key thing, like just again on these stories, that courage, that initial kind of bolt of courage that you need. Once you do that, I think it kind of sets off this kind of the momentum starts to build of like, this is a good thing. Like you just need to kind of take that first push of, it's really scary the first time you call someone out, or you like try and, put it on someone's radar that, hey, what you did made me feel really small. So it's the hardest thing in the world to do, but like it really sets off this kind of motion of being able to do it again and again and again.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I would add, and Steph mentioned this when she was speaking, is how important it is to have allies. Because look, it is sometimes hard to always be telling people how you feel about things, and always feeling like you have to carry the burden of every Black woman in your company, or every Indian, or every Asian, or every Hispanic. So it is really nice when you have other leaders or just peers or people in your group where you're like, hey, that just wasn't right. And I don't think that may not have been the intent of your message, but this is how I feel like it came across. So I also want to encourage others to make sure that you're standing up for other groups. The other thing I want to point out, Rachel, I had the exact same thing when everything going on in the world today. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table at my parents' house, trying to write an email about like everything that just happened with George Floyd, and I wanted to address it so bad, and I wrote it and rewrote it. I was like, Mom, listen to this. This is too much. Am I coming off too strong? Should I even write it? I was like so conflicted about it for some reason. And like eventually I just hit send and I held my breath a little bit. Immediately after that, and I sent it to my team, my leader reached out to me and was like, Raven, are you okay? And I think at that point is when, and we had a conversation in the meeting that we had as directors and SMB about what was going on. It was at that point that I could almost breathe a little bit and be like, okay, like people do care about this and people do support, me as an individual. And so there's no reason why I should have even hesitated to show that same support to my own group of people. But I went through that same thing. My mom can tell you where I wrote it 5,000 times before I sent it.
We all have voice in our head that's like, oh, should I say that's like exactly what Kennika was saying. Like you think that, oh, I don't know, should I? And it's even irregardless of what level you're in, what place and position.
Yep.
Yeah, if it just makes a difference for like one person on the team, or even two people on the team, it doesn't, like that's all it takes, and that makes it worth it. It makes the kind of stress and anxiety of like being like, is this what I should be doing right now? It makes it all worth it.
Absolutely. And I just want to say everything that you all have kind of discussed, I've resonated with each statement that you all made. I'm like picking out things. I'm like, yep, been there, done that. And I definitely want to say at the end of the day, I think it's important, if I were to like summarize it in my own words, to take up that space, because that's how you are going to grow. That's how you're going to evolve. Take up that space, and that's how you're going to ultimately be your true self. And one of our fun box values, bring your blank self to work. I especially love, Kennika, how you mentioned your name. I resonate with that, I think, the most. That's why I originally started going by Joe instead of telling people, hey, my name is Giovanni, because I don't want people to struggle or mess up. So without a doubt, I would definitely say there's been challenges that each of you all have had to face and overcome, and many of us on this in this webinar today. So I would really like to hear about some of the strengths that you all have found, and how it's actually guided you throughout your journey and your careers.
Yeah, I think with regards to challenges, I mean, there's plenty I think that we could go down the list and talk about, but one that really stands out to me and that I have frequent conversations about is imposter syndrome. When I graduated college, it all started at an early part of my career that I didn't graduate from a top tier university. I went to 2 years of junior college and then a state school. So applying for some of these jobs, I was like, am I qualified? Is this right for me? And so eventually overcoming that and getting the job and putting myself out there and then continue to grow, I realized that, it's not the school that I went to. I put in the work. It was my work ethic. It was my experience over the years. And I'm not discrediting a good college, by the way. If you can go, absolutely, please. That was just my situation at the time. And so I think with those challenges, you also find a sense of inner strength and a sense of resiliency and adaptability. It really it proves to yourself that and it helps build that confidence that you can overcome these obstacles, and you do deserve to be there, and you are worthy of that position. And then when it comes to strength, I mean, I wouldn't have that strength without, I mentioned it before in the previous question, but without my parents and just the support system that I have, where I know we're going to talk about that even more, but having good family, friends, and loved ones around, and seeing everything that my parents did to really give us a good life. So that definitely drives me and helps me find that strength to continue pushing past those challenges.
Yeah, Jackie, that actually resonates with me so much, because you're right. Like, there are so many challenges, but self-doubt is, and that, because it feeds your imposter syndrome, right? It's like, it's fueling the flame. And you're talking, when you mentioned like, oh, you're nervous because of the college that you went to. I mean, from a technical role and in solutions engineering, I have a bachelor's of arts, guys. I have a psychology and sociology degree, and everyone's always like, oh, what did you, like you said, a computer science, and I'm like, actually, I did not. And frankly, 6 years ago, I didn't even apply. I originally wasn't even going to apply for this job. When I was looking at Box, I was actually going to apply for a lower level tier position, and it wasn't in a technical space. And I had a friend who I went to high school with, and she was on the solutions engineering team, and she really pushed me to apply for the job. And I remember being like, I don't meet these qualifications. And she's like, you don't meet one of them. There's one bullet point that you don't meet. And that has really stayed with me, because I wouldn't be in this position if she hadn't encouraged me. And we often do that so quickly. No one else is telling me that I'm not technical enough. I'm telling myself that. I'm creating that self-fulfilling prophecy of self-doubt. And the most important thing that I've learned over the last 6 years is that it's up to me to gut check myself, because I'm creating a reality that is not the actual reality that the world sees. And if you can't check those thoughts, the other best way to be able to do is that, just like Jackie said, whether it's family or friends or a really powerful squad of women, like these women virtually sitting next to me, they will do that. They'll remind you. If you think of your best friend, she would never let you talk about yourself the way that you're probably talking to yourself in your head, right? And I think about that all the time. Like, when I talk to my friends and they're so nervous going to a negotiation, and they're like, oh, they might think this and I think, like, I don't think that. Even Raven and I, actually, when she was going up for her director presentation, she presented to me and we were talking about it. And I was like, there's so many other things that I see about your leadership that you're not putting in your presentation. And just really encouraging it and reflecting back also to your network of, hey, like, don't discount yourself, because who else is going to fight and who else is going to present, and pitch yourself in that way. We need to start seeing ourselves in that light as well. So I think that has actually been a big way for me to break through that self-doubt. That squad.
Rachel, the squad idea, like a group of really powerful, strong women, like, I think sometimes that self-doubt that you're talking about, it can be so isolating. It can feel like you're the only one that is experiencing it. And, without and like you said, it takes time to go build that gut check in you of being able to check yourself, but it takes time. And I think having women around you, like, eventually helps you build that up. Like, I think about all the times I've been with Jackie in a room, and we are the only two women in a room of, what a typical sales room looks like. And it's really nice to have someone there, because there are things that, we do that we can relate to each other of, like, Jackie, can you read this sentence and see if it sounds okay? I think if I asked, someone else that, they'd be like, why are you so concerned about this sentence? But, she can relate to me and saying, like, we have that little seed, that doubt of fear that kind of pulls us back a little bit. And we need someone there sometimes to just say, you're good, you have good instincts, like, trust your gut. And sometimes that's just so powerful, just someone there to say that. So, like, when I think about a strength, I think about the community that, luckily all of us have been able to build together with each other. Because it's so important as you move, further and further along in leadership.
Mm-hmm. And that imposter syndrome doesn't go away. If anything, stronger the more you progress. So definitely have that network.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I remember that we sat down for like 2 hours, Rachel, and building that deck. And I don't know why I was holding myself back so much in that. And I appreciate, you encouraging me to explore it from a completely different angle, because I do think that was a big part of, how I've framed my presentation and ultimately was able to get the job. I think the other part of that is, we are our own squad encouraging ourselves, but then we also have to reach back and encourage others. I was sharing with Rachel, I was meeting with someone that's interviewing for something on her team, and she was mentioning, she doesn't have as much of a technical background, and I know that's a concern for me because I'll be on the panel. And I was like, let's stop calling it a concern, because honestly, it's not. I was like, it's just a challenge. It's just something that you're going to figure out. And so that's another thing that I try to, when I'm talking to people about different opportunities and things. And I think Rachel, you brought up a great point. Us as women, we just have a tendency to have to check every box before we go for it. And I know I'm the exact same way. Like, I've done A, B, C, D. Oh, I'm good, right? But no, a role is supposed to be something you grow into. A role is supposed to be something that you learn from. A role is supposed to challenge you. It's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. When it stops, then it's time to move on. So we have to encourage ourselves, and then also, above and below, right, to also think of it that way too.
Yeah, and Steph actually mentioned one of her first professional mentors. I think back to mine, I think I was around 19 or 20. And I mean, she's still a very dear friend of mine, but to that point, she pushed me out of my comfort zone. She saw that I was capable, and she was like, JJ, you can do this. And she pushed me to make some tough calls, make some tough decisions. But ultimately, I think that leads into building some of the strength and overcoming that self-doubt too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love how you all have each kind of mentioned the folks who have played an important role in your life, whether it be your parents, like Jackie mentioned, or your squad, that network of folks, your champions. I definitely think at the end of the day that there are many folks who we can kind of call on rather, and credit them with playing a part in shaping and molding us. And as mentioned several times already, something I kind of want to dive a bit deeper into, because as many of you all on the call today, myself included, are probably wondering, how do you seek out that mentor or that champion or that squad? How do you get those folks in your corner who are going to push you outside of that comfort zone?
Yeah, Joe, I think that's a great question. For me, I think the first thing I have to figure out is, what am I trying to do? What are my goals? I have to write that down, because if you don't know what your goals are for yourself, you can't ask anybody to help you, right? And so once I figure out what my goals are, then I try to surround myself with people that support that. And I think another thing about mentors that people don't realize is, you don't just find one, right? It's a bunch of people. And the way that you should think about it is, it's a board of directors that supports you. And that board of directors are people within your organization. Those are people outside of your organization. They're also people in your personal life too. And I think another common misconception with mentors is, it has to be someone with a certain title, or they have to have a certain pedigree or something like that. No, fake news, absolutely not. Mentors come in so many different shapes and sizes. And, for me, I have mentors that are in careers that I aspire to be in, of course, but I also consider, my peers as well as being mentors for me. Oh my gosh, I call Sophie and Andrew all the time and talk through different scenarios and things that are going on in my business in that moment, because I trust and I admire their judgment and how they make decisions as well. And then my personal life also, I mean, honestly, I've probably learned some of my best life lessons from people like my grandmother, who never stepped foot on a college campus, or my mom, who taught school for 30 years, about things like how to treat people and how to communicate and how to just be a good human. And so I take a lot of those lessons with me in everything that I'm doing. So I guess my point is, mentors come in so many different shapes and sizes, and always be open to that relationship with people, for sure.
Yeah, Raven, I love the idea of the board of directors. I think as we're looking at building our teams, it's kind of similar, and it ties into that board of directors. We want diversity of experience and background and thought on our teams. Why not have that in your mentors as well? Somebody that, you may not align to personally, and you may not relate to them from a background perspective, but they have a skill set, they've taken a path that you admire and want to get to learn about. So I think that's also applying that to mentorship is key. And you'll be surprised a lot of the time, those mentors, if you just continue that relationship and are consistent and just ask questions and reach out, a lot of them will become your champions. And I do credit a lot of those champions along the way for where I am today and for all their help they've given me. So.
Yeah, I mean, Raven, Jackie, I totally agree with what you guys are saying. And especially Raven, your advice about like being very specific about what you're hoping to accomplish when you do seek out potential mentors for a very specific reason. So, because that mentor also needs to determine, can they help you? Will they be able to help you get to where you want to be? Is it up leveling? Is it a role? Is it learning, some aspect about the career or the job description? But I think what I've realized too is like, there's this analogy that people use when they talk about their career. They're like, oh, my career wasn't a straight line. Like, I went here and then made a bunch of moves. And I think like what I realized is mentorship, it's very similar to that, where there is no black or white when it comes to like, you are my mentor and that is like my relationship with you. Mentorship also goes through changes in the relationship. It evolves. Someone could start off as your, manager or peer, and then eventually become your mentor and like be that person on your board. So it's an evolution. It's not something that like, you may not even realize that you currently have mentors in your life. Maybe you're just not giving them that title. Like I had a manager, when I was an individual contributor, Lauren Willis, and we had a manager, individual contributor relationship, but as time evolved and, she moved on to different roles, I did as well. I realized I leveraged her like a mentor. I can still talk to her. I can still call her up one day and say, Lauren, I'm in this situation. I wanted to brainstorm some ideas with you. And I even have peers that I have learned so much from, peers in the sales organization who I can, go to and say, I need some guidance. Like I trust them and they've gone through similar experiences, and I would consider them mentors as well. So I agree, like don't put a title on it. It doesn't need to be, a C-level title in the organization. It doesn't need to be a VP level. You can get a lot of value out of the individuals around you.
Yeah, the other thing that I'll actually add about that too, why it's so important to know exactly what you're looking for in just what goals you want to accomplish is because sometimes the person that you think should be your mentor actually shouldn't be. And there's been situations that people have reached out to me and I was like, okay, let's talk through, what do you want to do? What's your what do you want to achieve? And is this short term? Is it long term? Like, what are the next steps that you see being successful in your mind? And then I'm frank with them, like, I'm happy to talk through this with you, but I actually think somebody else might be best suited for what you're looking for. And so it actually helps a lot of those individuals find other mentors. Maybe it's people in their organization that may know marketing better than I do. I, on the Solutions Engineering team, do not. And that really helps because we want to lift others up, even if necessarily we might not be the right mentor. Just because our title says director doesn't mean that we're the right mentor for every single person. And the other thing I think that, we all hit on is that mentorship is seasonal. And it can change, right? And so the woman that really encouraged me to apply for this role 6 years ago, I definitely count as my mentor because I think that as a minority and as a woman, we make decisions differently when it comes to big shifts, like starting a new job, applying for another job, going up for a promotion, because in some ways, like we know how difficult it can be to have that space for ourselves to find our voice and talk through it. And I've been really blessed by the managers that I've had who are also been mentors who've created that space for me and have allowed me to find my voice, find my identity. And frankly, it's very scary for me to not work for them again because I know how comfortable it is for me in that space. And so I think about that when I hire other minorities or women because I know how hard it would be for me. And there is an incredibly sharp Black woman on my team that it took me months to recruit and find, frankly, because I had a moment where I realized, like, just like how I didn't want to apply for this role 6 years ago, there may be another minority, another woman who also may not. And that's something that I think we should think about as leaders. How can we create mentors in the interview process as well? On the SC side, we've actually even added hiring mentors into our entire interview process, just to be able to, show them, hey, this is what it would be like to be an SC at Box. And it's not like that's a mentorship for your entire career. That's a mentorship just for the interview process to help our candidates, understand what the culture and community is like at Box as well.
And I think Box has done a really good job over the past couple months too, revamping the mentorship program. I know all of us here are signed up as mentors and have our mentee and have already spoken to them and started working with them. And so I think that's always been top of mind at Box as well. When I first started, it was kind of a group setting, and my first mentor is Jesse Davis, actually. And it was a group setting. It was a great opportunity to get to know other people across different offices and all that. But I really appreciate now that it's a more one-on-one approach. It really allows you to get to know that mentee and really help them out. And, if I can't answer all the questions, then I at least know how to help navigate her, basically, to anybody else that might be a little better at answer any questions for her.
Yeah. What I love about that program too is it's a structure that Box is putting in place versus putting the onus on, individuals who are maybe looking for a mentor and maybe nervous about like trying to seek out a mentor who, maybe looks like them or is, a woman and they can relate to. So I love that there is a process that got put in place so to bring people together, because it is sometimes difficult to put the onus on people who are minorities or women to go find those people themselves. Like, it is tough. And like we talked about earlier, there's this kind of confidence gap that sometimes you face of even trying to go ask people like, I just want to explore if, there is alignment here for mentorship.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that when that brings to mind, I was so nervous to ask my now VP and boss for his mentorship, because I was like, I don't think I'm good enough at my job yet. Like, I don't know if I am worthy to have this conversation to ask you to mentor me. And I actually told him this 3 years ago, and he looked at me like I was crazy. And so that's the same thing. Like, we have these seeds of doubt in our heads, like, oh, well, I have to work hard enough, or I have to get to a certain level before I can ask for this. And, why not just start that informal conversation and just see and get their perspective?
Mm-hmm.
I also like, Rachel, that you guys have mentors in your interview process. I think that's something that we could probably all start incorporating, because for the individual, on your team who I also know very well, and she's amazing. I can see, her and I, we talked about her journey to your team, and, part of the issue was she just didn't see herself in that role or understand exactly what that was going to look like. So I think that's a great idea to implement, just like, and again, going back to the point that mentors are seasonal. Sometimes there's a point, right? And you move on. And so, yeah, that's actually a good point.
Yeah.
I love that. Yes, I hope everyone was on the call today was taking notes. I certainly was, on these like seeds of wisdom, as well as we kind of have a theme here. Mentors are seasonal. We have seeds of doubt in our head. It's time for the harvest. Let's get these seeds out of our head. We don't even want them growing anywhere. I love that. But there were a lot of different things that were kind of like pinging off my head, as Raven mentioned, having a mentor in the hiring process. I love that. And that's an excellent idea, as well as I am so grateful at Box that we do have programs like this mentorship program to be able to help find those folks who are going to kind of, again, push us and champion for us. But I want to kind of touch on a point that you all were making, some excellent points in regards to how you're thinking about hiring and how you want to incorporate those diverse thoughts, as Stephanie mentioned at the beginning of today's session. So with regards to the hiring and diversity, I want to talk about, how do you all think about hiring folks for your teams?
That's a great one, Joe. For me, diversity is key. And let me break that down, what I mean, right? Not just physical diversity, even though I do think that's extremely important, but also diversity in thought, diversity in experience, diversity in education, et cetera, right? And one of the things that when I'm thinking about hiring, folks on my team, whether it's a manager or it's an individual contributor, I try to do a quick assessment. Okay, who do I have? What are some of the reps? What are some of the profiles? And the reason why I'm doing that is because I actually don't want that anymore. And not that I don't think that that's great. I mean, Ben, Justin, Monica, they're all amazing leaders for me. But how do I find people that can fit alongside them that'll actually push them and change their perspective and push them outside of their comfort zone, push me outside of my comfort zone so I can make sure that I'm learning from them. And I think a lot of that does start with the way that we recruit. And, you know, for me, I'm very fortunate that I do get to recruit, you know, in a more junior level sales position. So one of the things that I push my sales leaders to do is just be really open and to make sure, you know, that, you know, as we're thinking about candidates, we're not just looking for the same person. And I think it starts also, you know, from the bottom up on how we recruit from universities. Jackie, you touched on this earlier in your intro. I also came from state school, girlfriend, and would have loved to have been able to go to an Ivy League, but this was not my reality. And I did not think that that mattered so much because it didn't. And then 4 years ago when I got to Box and I hear about all these fancy universities and I'm like, oh, okay, people care about that. And to be completely honest with you, I think back 4 years ago, I felt like we put a little bit more weight on that than maybe we should have. And for those, all of us were here at that point in time. And I think we kind of went through a cycle, and I'll speak specifically for Austin, where we were hiring the same person over and over and over because we were recruiting for the same 5 or 6 schools. But what I will say and why I love Box and why I'm still here is because I pointed that out, and I've had conversations with my leaders. I've had conversations with recruiting. I've had conversations with some of the leaders on the Legion side about that. And we've already started making improvements in that area. I'm a part of a project right now where we're working on an internship program between Box and historically Black university to create opportunity. So that's really, really cool. It should kick off next summer. And then I was on a panel a couple months ago where we just talked to students from universities, primarily HBCUs. By the way, a vice presidential nominee comes from an HBCU. So there's so much talent there. And then the last thing I'll say on this piece and how I feel like we're turning it around is the most recent class of sales reps that we brought in is the most diverse I've seen in 4 years. So I'm encouraged, and, you know, obviously still waiting and see, but I guess my point that I'm making is that, you know, at Box, I do think that we're listening to that conversation and we're becoming more open-minded and aware of that, because that's going to eventually change the way that I can recruit, and, you know, us as leaders can actually add people to our team too.
I think, Raven, I mean, I just think you captured it so well. And so just on that note about kind of the pools as to where we're pulling this from, because I think something that gets brought up in this whole diversity of hiring conversation a lot is that, you know, diverse talent is scarce. So, you know, all the companies are fighting for this diverse talent, but it's really on us as leaders to diversify our funnels and streams of where we are pulling all of these individuals from. Like, you know, Rachel talking about going after this candidate and, like, you know, going and finding it because she's like, this is what I want and I'm going to go find it. And then, you know, Raven mentioned, I know she's working with Kate, who also heads up the lead gen organizations here at Box, and we're working on, you know, having pools of veteran talent, having pools from the historically Black universities, like having those funnels so that we can diversify the background of our talent. Because if we keep going back to the same pools and saying, oh, there's an issue, like that's on us. That's on us to be like, that's our problem. So if I could also give some additional, you know, guidance to folks who are also, you know, trying to figure out, like, how can I get into some of these funnels and these streams? It's one, obviously, you know, Raven mentioned, like, you know, we have to go fill every single bucket, apply for jobs that you feel like we're going to challenge you. And maybe you have some kind of background in it, but, like, go apply for those jobs. And then also get involved with professional, you know, groups or organizations that maybe align with, you know, in your community or your background, because again, the onus is on us. I'm not saying the onus is on people to go join these groups, but hopefully the companies that you want to work for that have environments you can thrive in are going to go start looking at those pools, because again, the onus is on us. We need to be proactive, but hopefully, you know, you're putting yourself in a good position by starting to engage in some of the funnels and the pools that we're going to look at. Because I know that's important to our team right now. I know Raven mentions it's important to her team, and our teams are the funnels that will eventually be field reps, that will eventually be leaders in the sales organization. So we want the makeup to look kind of what we want to see it in 5 years, to see it in 10 years.
Pause really quickly just to read out a comment in the chat. We're actually going to hop into the Q&A segment of today's session. So if you do have a question for our panelists today, please utilize that Q&A pod located at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. Now hopping back into kind of the conversation that we are currently having, I want to say, first of all, yes, absolutely love what you all are already thinking and the efforts that are already being put into place. Having that funnel, absolutely would agree. Raven, I, as a graduate of a historically Black university myself, had no idea what Box is, never heard of it. It was not on my radar. And I don't think my university was on Box's radar as well until they created this program called the Box Business Fellowship, where they were actively seeking out minorities in these kind of quote unrepresented like pools to actually expose them to Box. So that's how I ended up here, and that's how we find that diverse talent and, you know, bring others to the table. So a question that's already in the Q&A pod, which actually is an amazing segue from Joe here, and we've already kind of identified one. We talked about kind of the way we are finding candidates. What is one blind spot you all believe that someone in leadership or a management role can identify today and the action to remediate it immediately?
It's such a good question.
Yeah,
Great
it is.
question.
I may actually take it a little bit off of hiring, and I can share a story I shared with these ladies. Sometimes, and I mentioned this earlier, sometimes it is hard to carry, I don't want to even say it's a burden because it is not a burden, but to carry maybe the weight of being the only person in the room at times. And sometimes in that weight, you struggle with knowing when you should say something and when you shouldn't. And I'll share a story that happened with me that really made me realize how important my voice was, and this was not ill intended, so I want to just start there. But we were sitting in a room of leaders. Again, I'm the only Black woman in the room, and I wasn't a director at the time. I was just a manager. And we were talking about a celebration type sales thing that we wanted to do. And so one of the things that someone suggested was, it was in May, and so we were like, let's have a Cinco de Mayo party. And the way the party was, that they were, you know, planning the party was kind of like sombreros and hats and, you know, all these kinds of things. And I'll be honest, like hearing it initially, I went, okay, right? Because I think I was in a place of not trying to rock the boat in that moment. And so they went ahead and started planning the party. And then our Latinx community, which absolutely rightfully so, reached out to us as sales leaders and definitely told us that how insensitive they even thought of having that kind of a celebration would be. And in that moment, I said to myself, oh my God, Raven, you were the only minority in that room. And if they would have been having a Black History party, you would have been mad. So why in the world did you not think about it from that other lens? And so I guess bringing it back to the question, sometimes a blind spot for me, and I think a common theme for us has been, it's just trying to comply and fit in at times and losing our voice in the room for the simple fact of trying to just not always shoulder that, right? And so I am really, really working on not doing that anymore, because these things are too important. And just like I go advocate for me personally, I also have to advocate for the groups around me, because I have people, Latinx community on my team. One of my managers is Latinx. So there's absolutely no reason why I should not have stood up in that moment and said, guys, this is not the kind of party that we should be planning. Again, lesson learned. But for me, sometimes the blind spot is, for me, is just trying to fit in, if that makes sense.
And I completely agree with that, Raven. I think I do the same thing. Like I will, like we were all talking about, like we feel like we have this need to assimilate. But on the flip side, I think that sometimes for leaders, myself included, we will say, okay, well, you know, Raven should have that conversation, or Rachel should have that conversation because they're the minority and they're the woman. But it can't always be from the woman or the minority in the room. So when everything was happening earlier this year, we were having a leadership conversation, and I have the most diverse team in my organization. And they're like, oh, well, do you think so-and-so would like to talk about it? And at first I was like, oh yeah, it's a great opportunity. And then suddenly I was like, no. And but that was a bias that I had. That was a blind spot that I had, because I was almost about to say, oh yes, absolutely. I think that would be, a phenomenal way for them to share their experiences. And I was like, no, they should not be called to explain their experiences. I should not be called to always explain my experiences. We need allies to step up and make that space for us, just like how I had the blessings where my white male managers, I've actually only ever worked for white men, but they all created that space for me, where they stood up for me actually oftentimes when I didn't even know that I should be saying something myself.
And maybe this is more like to kind of building on what Raven and Rachel are saying too, because it kind of takes you out of your normal kind of day-to-day to have to be the contrarian in the room, to have to be the one to represent the women or represent, a minority, or it kind of takes you out and gives you that sense of otherness. And it is exhausting sometimes to continuously live in that state. So I will say on the flip side too, maybe for leaders that are not us, just like recognizing that is something perhaps your leadership team is experiencing, is a day-to-day of like just going up against that. You're a woman, you're like, maybe you're operating differently, you want different things from your team in a different way, and it can be exhausting. So I think something all sales leaders and go-to-market leaders can do is just recognize that and maybe take some of the onus on themselves of, let me think about this beforehand and give this a little bit of thought of who might be a good person to lead this initiative or this kind of, diversity project or something like that. So I think it kind of goes both ways, recognizing it ourselves and also making sure leaders do the same.
Yeah.
And I think for leaders as well, especially in today's like political and social climate, I think just really taking a step back and keeping the human element in the team. I know it's been a very rough year for everybody. And so also just making sure you're leading with empathy. That's something that I constantly have to take a step back. And I'm like, I know we still have a job at hand. I know we're running a million miles a minute still, and we're still trying to get done and get a ton of things done. But, my team, they're still humans. They're still having feelings, and they're still struggling through certain elements of it. So making sure that also not skipping over that human interaction in your catch-ups with them, and just genuinely checking in on them and asking, how are you doing? How can I help? And I think that's also a blind spot right now that can be skipped over a lot with some leaders. So just making sure that you're aware that, there's still that human element, and take time to actually check in with your teams.
Yep.
Love it. Love it. I just wanted to highlight some comments that are coming in the Q&A pod. They're actually not questions, but Chastity and Rosa saying, you all are fantastic. You all are great. They love hearing these conversations, and things that you all are saying in the comments are really resonating with them, and they want to continue for us to, or want us to continue to be able to have conversations like this, candid conversations where we're open, honest, and sharing kind of different insights. So just wanted to spotlight that. And then I also wanted to let you all know that we are also incorporating the raise hand feature in Zoom webinar. So if anyone wants to ask a question live, you can use the raise hand feature, and one of our lovely facilitators will help unmute you so you can ask your question live. But we do have several questions already in the Q&A, so I'm going to pick one out here from Tristan asking, if you were to point to one strategy in hiring and developing diverse talent within Box that's been the most successful, what would it be? And I think we've already highlighted some, but if you all want to touch on that again, or maybe talk about your favorite.
I think that's a work in progress.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I can't point to one strategy, because I think, and I have all my peers here who are kind of going through this process too, is we are continuously working on refining this internal mobility process, and we're trying to make it like, there's such a balance of, you want to make it very objective of like, these are our metrics, these are our requirements. But also, like, within this conversation, we've learned that people have different experiences. They have different ways that they approach things. And we do need to build some of that in there. So I'd say the one kind of strategy that we are doing is we're making sure there's dialogue internally. We're making sure the cracks are being, brought up and bubbled up to the surface, and that different experiences are being discussed in these processes. Like, I can't say that we have a great, completely bulletproof internal mobility process, but we are recognizing that if we are going to keep these funnels of talent going from entry-level sales all the way up into, a field role or leadership roles, that we can't have them, leaving the organization prior to that because our standards or our, list of requirements is so rigid that it only adheres to one group of people. So, I don't think that fully answers the question, but I hope it highlights like that we have a structure and we're, it has worked, but we are continuously working on refining it. And that's like a key there.
Yeah, and I think what I would add to that is our structure worked for where we were 4 years ago, 5, 6 years ago, when we were smaller and we were in this massive, like, we have to just funnel as many people up as we can, right? I think we're in a different space now. I think tech's in a different space. I think the world's in a different space. And so what I'm encouraged by is the way that we're thinking about being more open and encouraging our managers to be more open to the types of profiles that we're interviewing. When I first got to Box, almost all my sales reps came from one company, to be completely honest with you, because that's what I was comfortable. I guess, I don't know what I was thinking. And they were all great, not to discredit that. But now when I'm talking to Julie and team, like, I'm asking them for different backgrounds. I'm asking them for different industries. I'm asking them for different education levels. And I think those are the kinds of things that are starting to help change the way that I see my own organization. And then also just finding the balance, because as Kennika said, right, like, we've got a really good internal process, and her reps come to my team, right? So like, I'm very invested in how she recruits, because then a lot of times that affects mine, but then I have to find the balance between, going internally and then also, understanding what's out there externally, because there's a lot of people that have had really great experiences at amazing companies that we could also learn from at Box, right? So I'm also trying to find the right balance between the internal and the external candidates too.
The one thing I'll add on top of that, that actually answers, I think, another question where someone's asking, like, how do you differentiate yourself as a candidate? I've challenged my leadership team to think about what's non-negotiable. A Bachelor of Arts versus a Bachelor of Science, that's negotiable. Like, if that candidate is learning, has proven that they are quick learners, they've worked very hard, they're passionate, they're self-aware, those are non-negotiables, because that's incredibly hard to coach someone to be aware, to be thoughtful, to be intentional, to, really care about their work and care about the people around them. And that's how you set yourself apart as a candidate, right? Mm-hmm. When you are on that conversation with your hiring manager, or you're going up to the panel, talk about, like, these, you're right, I might not have that bachelor degree of computer science, but I have self-taught myself and I have learned all of these things, and this is the way that I approach problems. That's an incredibly big differentiator for me when I see that on my panels.
Yeah, I love that, because for me, I was an education major. I thought I was going to be a teacher. And one day I still might go do that. I didn't think I'd be selling technology at all. So I also trying to, get my reps to realize, or my managers to also realize, I'm not even really looking for that as background, actually. I'm looking for good people that are eager and ready to learn and can hold, the types of conversation and can dig into use cases. But what they were selling before this doesn't always matter, really.
Totally. Right. I mean, I was a political science major. I thought I was going to be in government, and here I am. And so really looking past, making sure, you're not just making sure they check the boxes, but getting to know them. Do they have that grit? Do they have that tenacity and that willingness to learn and just dive in? And are they curious? There's a lot more factors into somebody's potential than just what's written on a piece of paper.
Potential's big.
Yeah. And I just want to call it, like, Rachel and Raven, something you said, which is enabling your managers, like, all these characteristics that you're trying, because, you're leading by example of saying, giving them the opportunity to screen these people in a way that, you've kind of helped them mold that process of figuring out do we as a team, let's have a dialogue and figure out what's non-negotiable. Then let's have a dialogue about what are the characteristics we're looking for and what are the, actual actions and, examples of those things that Jackie mentioned, which is grit, charisma, whatever the characteristics are, making sure that we have a very specific path of doing that. And I just love that you guys are enabling your managers, because they're the ones on the front lines trying to recruit or, bring these people on. And it's so important to empower them to be able to do that as leaders.
Thanks, Kay.
Absolutely. And we actually have our first live question. So I'm going to allow them to unmute and introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, ladies. This is Siobhan Lawler. I am an account executive at Pendo, so I'm joining a group of Pendo ladies who have been listening in, and we just thank you guys for what you're doing, because it's been great to participate. So I'm a black woman at Pendo, and I think a lot of the feedback that I've gotten from some of the other Black counterparts at the organization, quite frankly, I've experienced it pretty much everywhere I've gone, because I'm usually the only woman of color, and usually definitely only the Black person in the organization that I work, is how do you, when you're talking about from a mentorship perspective, and I posted this in the chat as well, how do you work through, the concerns that a lot of people that look like me have when it becomes of being paired with the right person? Because there's a lack of relatability, there's a lack of understanding, and there's this natural feeling of, hey, I can't show what would be perceived as weakness, because that is going to limit my ability to progress. And it's much easier to have those types of conversations and just be real when you have someone who you feel like gets it and is relatable. And I think that's a struggle that I've seen on one side, is how we push ourselves to not be fearful and put ourselves in positions where we can get access. But the flip side of that is, how do we help the folks that don't look like us kind of meet us where we're at and help to be a resource in that regard?
I'm happy to start this question. First of all, I love your question. And I also, like you, am always feel like the only one in the room that looks like me, so I can relate. I think when we think about mentors, and going back to the point I was making earlier, is it just doesn't always have to be, you can always seek people outside of your organization. That would be the first thing that I would say. I would think also on the other side of that is, I have a mentee that I am mentoring right now through the Box mentorship program. And she happens to be African-American as well. She's actually on Rachel's team. And what I love about our relationship is it's very mutual, because to be complete, and Joe, actually, her and I were having this conversation last week. Was it last week or the week before? But sometimes for me as a leader, I don't really want to be a leader in this conversation. I just want to be a Black woman. And sometimes I just want to talk about girlfriends and watching Sister on Netflix and what's going on in the world and what I'm doing with my hair today. I mean, just whatever, right? And so I use that relationship with my mentee, who we are at various places in life, to talk about experiences as a Black woman. And that has helped me. And I know that that's not a perfect answer, but the reality of the situation is, I don't have anybody else of color that's, like, I guess, traditionally above me in a way. And I don't even like to use the term above, but in my company right now. So I have to leverage the relationships that I have started to build, and I use them for my own benefit also. I think the other piece about mentorship is, when I think about mentors that I've had, they're all different shapes, sizes, colors, ethnicities, all of it. And so I pull from so many different people. Like, I pull so many things from Rachel and Jackie and Kennika, and the people on this panel, and my own leader, who is Jesse, who's a white male. I've learned so much from him over the last few years. So I think it's also just being open to learning from people that are different from you, and then just being able to pull those experiences and apply them too. So I know it's not a perfect answer, and I'm sorry, because I don't have that answer yet. But I will say that that's how I've tried to work through that myself, for sure. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
I'll actually add one thing to answer the portion of your question about how do you create that space when your mentor is male, white, just does not look like you, because all of my mentors and managers have been male, and all of my managers have also been white. And even as I was prepping for this, I was talking to a young woman on my team. She's like, well, you've never had a mentor that was a woman? And I was like, no. But also, like, mentorship looks different, right? So, like, I would say Raven's also been my mentor in perspective, but, like, that more technical sense. It's really important. I really encourage you to figure out a way to be able to share your experiences so that that person can relate in some ways. And so sometimes that could be about age, right? Because tech especially, it's becoming increasingly younger. And as you share those experiences, what has really helped me, and again, I don't know if this is a perfect answer in any way, but I try to give them the perspective of, you walk into a room and you see that it looks really similar. But for me, I can count on one hand the amount of Asian women solutions engineers that I've ever met in my whole life. And I really try to stay connected. Like I'm going out to SEO orgs, I'm looking for them. But they don't understand that gravity until you almost like try to start peeling it back and talking to them about it. And the other thing that's really helped is asking really like open-ended questions. Like, what do you observe when I'm presenting, when you're seeing me walk through, like what have you seen? And to start that conversation. That's really helped me.
Thank you, lady.
Were you gonna add?
Yeah, I like Raven, I do not have like a great answer in terms of like the solution for this, but the only thing I wanted to mention is like this whole idea of the safe space. Like I really understand that and I relate to that, because the last thing you want is a mentor taking some of these insecurities, taking like where you're struggling, and then the fear that they're going to use it in some other way or go talk to other leaders about it. So I don't know if it's helpful at all, but like I definitely go through kind of an interview process with my mentors and like kind of pressure test a little bit. Like it is a two-way street. So I definitely have to spend time doing that. And I look for signs in their everyday leader, like the way they operate on a daily basis. And I look for signals of like, am I seeing this the same kind of person and personality that I do in my one-on-one sessions with them? And it kind of is a little bit of a compass. I hate that the onus is, on us to go gauge these mentors and go create this safe space for us, because it should be easier. But I definitely believe in this concept of like people show you who they are, and if you're seeing them operate in a way in everyday business as a leader in a way that doesn't align with you, and it's different when you're in a one-on-one with them, like I think that's a real sign that is in a safe space. But on the opposite side, it's like if there are signals that they're giving you, like you should feel comfortable, hopefully, of having that mentor-mentee relationship with them.
Yeah, and just adding on to that, I think it takes time too. I mean, similar to everything that all the ladies have said, I don't walk into a room and I see somebody myself and that can be my mentor. So over the years, the majority of my mentors here have been white males. And that's taken time to build that trust with them and really be able to rely on them and know that they get my point of view, and that when they challenge me and they push me and they're asking questions, it's for my own benefit as well. So, I mean, I've been here 4.5 years now, and I've been working with them for those 4.5 years. And so it is now a reciprocal relationship, and there is a mutual trust and respect.
Absolutely. Those are some wonderful insight. If I could drop my 2 cents into the bucket, I think in regards to having that supportive environment, one thing that Vox is, I would say, really good at is supporting our employee resource communities. So these communities where folks can not only be supported by folks who look and identify the same way that they do, but we also have tons of allies who are intertwined into these communities as well, who are able to uplift us and be a support resource. And with that said, as a little segue, we have a great question here from Ronnie asking on the topic of allyship, what are a few ways men can be helpful within the progression of women's success in the professional space?
Listen.
Yeah, listen, say something when you know it's not right, it's probably not right. Say it. Don't always, and I think someone said this earlier, but don't always put it on us to carry that burden to speak out when it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the biggest ask that I have, for sure.
And I think understand that your experience and your path isn't going to be similar. So, really taking that time to gain an understanding of our viewpoint.
And the other thing I'll add is just show up. Sometimes you don't need to say anything, just show up.
Mm-hmm.
Consistency is key too, I think. I think that's what's really helped over the years in developing that trust is that, you know, it's remained consistent. So I do appreciate that.
I think it's scary for, it's nerve wracking for us to speak up. So I can only, I imagine men probably feel the same, like, oh, like, am I speaking out of turn here? But you're not. Like, if you have this kind of gut instinct that, like, oh, that was a little bit of a weird comment, like, we probably have it too, and probably 10 times that. So, know that, like, there is going to be someone in the room that is thankful or grateful that you said, that was kind of a weird comment. Did you mean that? Did you intend for people to feel this way? Because it is tiring for us to always have to kind of take ourselves out of the situation and bring up that, we felt something a little weird about it.
And Kay, that actually reminds me, incredible, one of my peers and good friend, we were on the same leadership team, and he noticed that I kept getting interrupted. And frankly, I actually didn't even notice. I think I'm just so used to it that I was like, oh, you're going to talk. And he's like, actually, Rachel was going to say something. And that's all it is. Just one sentence, create that space for, that woman or that minority to be able to speak up.
Rachel, I cannot imagine anybody interrupting. Gonna say, but okay.
Who was it, Rachel?
Just kidding.
As we wrap our Q&A period, I want to kind of combine a comment that came in from the Q&A pod, as well as a question that Julius has asked here. So someone just making a great point that we as minorities sometimes have to work much harder to make ourselves heard, and we are by default judged because of it. And what are some tips for folks that it's okay to be who you are and normalize being different, as well as Julius was asking, how do you stand out as a diverse candidate? So how can we, some tips to make us feel okay to be different, and then how do we stand out when we are, going for these roles? Like it's normal for me to stand out because of this way.
Great question.
Really good question. I think we're all thinking on it.
I know, that's a hard one, actually.
It is really hard because, we kind of talked about this too, is like this balance of we want to stand out and we want to be different, but we also want to be part of the teams. We want to be considered no different than anyone else. So I think that's where in Camden is struggling with what are the areas people should stand out and when should they feel comfortable? Because just speaking from my personal experience, I think I still work through that, and I'm still trying to figure out what is the answer to that question.
Yeah, I agree with you. I haven't figured it out fully. I will say some of the things that I've learned in that is just realizing that you matter. My mom, she's a school teacher, y'all. And so she says, don't be matter in the room, matter to the room, if you get it. But anyway, which I think is cute to say, but it's true, right? Don't just be in the room, right? Don't just be someone that's there sitting there not saying anything, because we need your voice. We hired you because we needed your voice. We need your perspective. We need your experience. I need your experience to learn from. And so does my team. So that's what I would say to that.
I think we discussed this before too, that, being different actually is a benefit. I think your voice is actually stronger, and I think you will be heard louder and more clear than anybody else in the room if everybody kind of looks similar, so I think use it to your advantage.
Jackie, that's literally stole the words right out of my mouth. I don't actually think it's about normalizing being different. For whoever asks this question, don't normalize. Mm-hmm. You have different experiences, and you should bring them to the table. And I only say that because I actually had a conversation with one of my managers where I was feeling really down. I think I probably was interrupted or something happened. And I was saying, I kind of wish I didn't look this way. Like, I feel like there's so many assumptions made when I look this way. And it's not the case for you, because, again, working for a white male manager. And he looked at me and he's like, that's not wrong. It's true. I walk in and I look the same as everyone else. But sometimes that difference, that's when people pay attention. And also, a lot of times with men, they're like, oh, well, I know this, but you speak. And they're like, oh, that's, that creates a different space, and you can create a different relationship where they might actually share more information with you because you make them feel more comfortable, or you were being more honest about something that maybe I can't have that conversation with. And that really turned it around for me, that, I'm in my head thinking that this is not enough, or I'm looking different or whatnot, but that actually is a strength because you will stand out and you will create a space in a way that others will not be able to.
Mm-hmm. And be unapologetic about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I think this kind of kind of speaks to a little bit of the question, which is like, how do you find that opening or that confidence to like really show that part of yourself? And I love, Rachel, that you kind of talked a little bit about that, which is you were vulnerable with a manager, or you were vulnerable with someone on the team, and like talked about like, hey, this is where I'm not feeling like I can be 100% myself. And you got a great different perspective. So maybe there is an element of like showing your differences and showing a little bit of that vulnerability of, this is where I'm feeling like I can't be myself, or I'm feeling like I'm not, good enough for the team. And so it seems like a lot of that confidence came from being open and honest, and then realizing there was another viewpoint that, made you feel a little bit more confident.
Yep.
I love it. So we have actually one more live question, and then I'm going to actually wrap with a final question for
That
you.
is my sister.
Oh, well.
Well, hello, ladies.
Hello.
Love seeing this. So much color and leadership. This y'all are like a beautiful shaded quilt. I love it. But I do have a question, and this could be for anybody in the room. I work for a very big company, an amazing company that I work for, and like we've already been discussing just as girlfriends here, we have a lot of changes coming through and a lot of opportunities for minorities. I too am a woman of color, and there's a lot of things that I'm seeing posted now for opportunities in leadership for people of color, and that was posted on one of our company's page. I do have, someone made a comment and it kind of bothered me a little bit, and I don't know if this is something I should be bothered by or what, but I was talking about putting more diversity in leadership. Love it, okay? Because it's not just diversity of skin, it's diversity of thought. It's so important. But someone commented under the page and they said, well, I hope they do this because people are deserving, not just because of the color of their skin. And that, it didn't sit right with me, because I just feel like as a minority, we've been at such a disadvantage for so long, whereas you have been at an advantage for so long. You know what I'm saying? Who's not to say that that hasn't happened to you? And why should I feel less than for going for a higher position because you're making me think, oh, they're just doing it because you're a woman and because you're Black? Have y'all ever encountered that? And am I thinking about this the correct way?
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, absolutely. I've absolutely felt that. I've absolutely had that commentary at me as well. Like, oh, well, she's a woman, so that's why she got the management role. And that's why when I was saying we have to come correct, like your work speaks for itself. And don't let people tell you otherwise. As Raven was saying, like, oh, well, she just got this because she's Black. She just got this because she's a woman. When we come correct, when our work is speaking volumes beyond the ways that we look, that's the difference. And then also, I think it's really important to also repeat that comment to your manager or your VP or whoever made that decision to put you in that role. Say, hey, FYI, like, this is what it's like for me, that people will second guess my work purely because of the way that I look, which would probably not have happened if I looked differently. And that also then creates a space for your VP to say and highlight, like, I put Rachel in this position because of these reasons.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Also, this is more of, sorry, Raven, this is just more of a comment. Like when people say, well, make sure it's the most qualified, it kind of gets to me a little bit, because I'm like, those qualifications, who determined that? What is the background on those qualifications? Like, can we kind of dig into that a little bit? When you're saying most qualified, let's really understand, like, where did those qualifications come from? Who's come before you that created those qualifications? And like, I think that's like a conversation, you know, obviously a very large conversation in itself, but I think, you know, really digging into that, like I think that's a question that needs to be asked is, well, what is your definition of most qualified and who set those qualifications? And, you know, there's people probably who didn't look like us who came before us that said, this means most qualified, and they may not be correct.
Amen.
That's true.
Love that. Yeah, I don't have
That's
anything else.
very true.
Yeah.
Raven, what do you have to say specifically?
Okay. I think the biggest thing for me is just being unapologetic, but we can definitely talk offline. Oh my goodness.
Okay. I'll schedule some time with you.
She's getting a one-on-one.
Oh yeah. But you know what? That's awesome. But it does, because for so long, skin tone has been advantageous to some and the exact opposite to others. And to me, I'm thinking, man, if this is, times are really terrible right now, but if this is the universe's way of saying, hey, we've created a pocket for you, get in there, then that's exactly what I want to do. And I don't want to feel bad about it because I do feel that I'm qualified. So no, that's reaffirming. Thank you.
Totally. Let that be a little fire in your belly too, to just go and prove them wrong. Like if that is me, that's putting a little fire in me too. So
Yeah. I'll be on next year's panel. This was good.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, you will.
Oh my goodness.
Thank y'all.
I love it. I mean, you would honestly think this stuff writes itself because this is a great segue into our final question for today. So as we're wrapping our conversation, if there's one thing you want the audience to take away from today's conversation, what would it be? And when you all think about your legacy and sharing it with other women of color, what does that look like?
I think I would say some key takeaways is find your inner voice and use it. Don't be afraid to speak up and continue challenging yourself. I think you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish and continue pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. I think to Raven made this point earlier, when you get complacent and comfortable, you're not growing. So continue finding those mentors and those champions, that network that will continue pushing you and helping you grow. And then I think in regards to legacy, I've been very lucky to have a lot of people throughout my career take a chance on me. You know, I may not have been the most qualified on paper, but they saw something in me. So they gave me a chance, and I hope to continue paying that forward and really, you know, finding those people that have that potential and just giving them that opportunity to prove themselves.
Yeah, and I think for me, like I didn't even really start thinking about a legacy until probably more recently. So I'll share a quick story. So I had a rep on my team. She was African-American female that took an opportunity outside a box. And that opportunity was best for her and her career. And we were absolutely excited for her for that journey. And so she put some time on my calendar for a one-on-one before she left. And one of the things that she said to me that really touched me in a way is she said, you know, I want to thank you because I don't know. She said, I want to thank you because you're the first African-American woman I've ever worked for. And she said, as excited as I am for this next opportunity, I don't know if I'll ever get that opportunity again. And like, I actually got really emotional because it was like in that moment that I realized how much it mattered. And I think for me, I never even actually viewed myself that way. And so I remember going home and I was talking to my husband about it because I was just like really bothered by the fact that, you know, I started feeling again that insecurity and like the whole I'm the only one here and like, what do I even do? And I had a conversation with my dad's actually a retired colonel in the Air Force. So he's been in lots of rooms where he's the only one. And I was sharing that story with him and I'm like, I don't even know what I do with this. Like, how do I even make a difference? How do I change this? And one thing he said to me is he said, well, Raven, what you do is you go find the next Raven and you help her to grow in her career so that she has space to go find the next Raven and she can make an even bigger impact on her and her career. And that's how that cycle continues. And so when I think about just that, right, it makes me realize that I have to be more deliberate in my advocacy and I have to be more deliberate in me asking for opportunities for people, because at this point, this is just way too important for me to sit here and ignore it because it's comfortable for everybody, right? And so when I think about my own legacy, you know, I want to be known for someone that creates spaces for everyone to be able to thrive, that creates opportunities for women and people of color and really everyone throughout the organization. And I think most importantly sets the type of example where people like me 10 years ago can say, I can go do that because I see that, and I see the possibility of that, and I see what I can become in that. So that's kind of what I would part on you guys too, and what I'm trying to do myself.
Yeah, I know we're at time, so I don't think I'll even be able to top that fantastic kind of legacy that Raven is leaving behind. But I think for me, it's just like, I think at some point there's a tendency to look around the room and be a little nervous that no one is there like you. It can be a scary experience. It can be a lonely experience, or you can think to yourself, this isn't the career path for me. And all I want to leave people with is like, don't let the fear of failure or the fear of like being the only one in the room keep you out of a sales career or go-to-market career. Like, give yourself grace, and you know, have time with your feelings, but know that you being who you are, your unique perspective will make a difference. And you just never know how much you're inspiring people. Like Raven, not knowing, like, she was so inspiring to this person on her team and made such an impact kind of without even knowing it. Like, that is, I think, what I just want to leave people with is, it can be scary. It might be a little lonely, but together, like, we will be that community, and we can kind of shake up these structures. And like, when we talk about the qualification criteria, we can change those things that were not originally built for us, like, together. So that is just what I want to leave people with.
Yeah, and the only thing that I can add, is really not much to add here, is you don't have to be a manager or a director, or like, you can do that as an individual contributor, as an entry-level position, because that, when you decide to speak up, when you stop second guessing yourself, whether it's the way you say your name, as Kennika has shared, your role, your level, your background, your school, like, when you stop second guessing and you decide to speak up and make that space, it creates a ripple effect, and then it'll create another one. And you literally, again, as Raven said, like, you don't know what's going on in these other ripple effects, because you could also start another one over here, and that just cascades out. And so the more that we speak up for each other, the more impact we'll be able to do collectively.
I love it. I love it. As we wrap today, I felt so emotional by what Raven shared too. One, because I knew that person, and I'm like, that is something that plays such a big part that we just kind of put into the back of our mind and second guess. But as we are wrapping today, I think some key takeaways definitely is like, don't be afraid to take up that space. And one of my favorite box values, take risks and fail fast. Remove those seeds. It's time to harvest them on out. As someone mentioned in the comments, like, my goodness, like, there is so much that we have taken away from you all today. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing your insight with us. It has been truly amazing. And I also want to say a huge shout out and thank you to you all for attending today's webinar. A special shout out to Stephanie Carullo, as well as DJ Gion for bringing us in with the rockin' tunes. And I just want to leave you all on this note as we wrap today. So at Box, we truly believe that community is both a mindset as well as a set of actions that impact our experience here as Boxers. And when it comes to our culture and the way we operate, how we do our best work. Our community mission is to build inclusive spaces that enable us to grow and connect and impact to move forward, not only just at Box, but beyond Box as well. So we are fulfilling this mission by driving equity and access inside of Box and outside of Box. And that's why it's so important for us to continue to really have events like this. As many who attended this event today have mentioned how insightful it's been and how much we were able to really take away from it. So with that being said, I really want to, again, thank everyone who participated in this, who helped put this together. Thank you all so much for attending. This has been a wonderful conversation, and we really hope to continue to have conversations and events like this going forward. So with that said, be on the lookout. You could follow us on LinkedIn or the events that we're hosting by following the hashtag LifeEdBox. We'll be sure to be posting and highlighting some of the different things that we're doing as a company. I know there were a few questions about ways to partner with us or ways to kind of be a better ally. Be sure to just engage and interact with us, because we're always looking for different ways to grow, and we all also want to see the growth beyond Box as well. So with that said, thank you all so much for attending today's webinar. It's been a true pleasure and a treat.